It was a warm and dusty morning in the Eastern Cape Bushveld. We moved slowly across the dusty red ground with the sun starting to warm our backs. Our mood was great. It was early in the hunt and we were still settling into a routine with a liberal amount of joking. Suddenly, we spotted movement among the shrubs further ahead to the right. An impala was heading into an open area, straight into my line of fire. Piece of cake and a great way to start the safari, I thought to myself. Famous last words. Stay tuned and hear what went wrong and how you can avoid making the same mistake. Welcome to the Red Kettle channel. This is where you get tips and tricks to help you think faster and act faster when hunting. Today it's all about the time I missed an impala at short range. Can you believe it? I couldn't. I've been a passionate hunter since I retrieved the first pheasant from my dad at the tender age of 3 or 4 years. After that I eventually graduated and got my own license, and the fun really started when I got my first rifle. For a long time my approach to hunting was based on experiencing, which meant exploring different destinations and hunting different animals. And in some way, conscious learning took a backseat. I didn't realize that hunting would be more fun if I mastered the skills, and that mastering the skills would be a source of satisfaction and exploration in its own right. That fact wasn't a big revelation, and I'm still reflecting on and learning from the many experiences I've had so far in my hunting career. Several incidents stand out, and here's one of them. Let's head to South Africa. It was a dusty morning in the Eastern Cape Bushveld. We moved slowly across the dusty red ground with the sun starting to warm our backs. Our mood was great. It was early in the hunt and we were still settling into a routine with a liberal amount of joking. Suddenly we spotted movement in the shrubs furthest to the right. An impala was heading into an open area, straight into my line of fire. Piece of cake, and what a great way to start the safari, I thought to myself. Famous last word. David, the PH, got a pair of short sticks ready and I knelt down to take a shot. For the hunt, I brought my semi-custom C-set in 416 Rigby. It was way more than needed for plains game, but I wanted to get to know it before using it on larger animals. The sticks were set too high for the distance, and this is where I made the last big mistake in a sequence that started before leaving for South Africa. I didn't adjust the height. Instead, I leaned forward into the sticks to get my crosshairs on the impala. I was uncomfortable, but the sudden pressure to get things right made me ignore the warning signs. The impala was straight ahead and it was decision time. As it paused, I pulled the trigger. That released the firing pin and sent it forward, hitting the primer. The primer compound exploded and sent a jet of flame and hot gas into the cartridge case. That way the primer ignited 84.1 grains of smokeless powder, turning it into gas and creating a pressure that spiked around 52,000 psi. This pressure pushed a 400 grain soft-nosed bullet into the lance through the barrel, where it started spinning fast and began its journey towards my intended target. And I'm saying intended for a reason. When I'd settled back into my natural point of aim after absorbing 67.05 foot-pounds of recoil energy, my rifle was pointing slightly upwards, and the impala was on the other side of the clearing, going full speed towards an unknown destination, unscathed. No more holes in it than when the sun first rose that day, because I'd managed a clean miss at less than 100 yards. No reaction suggested a hit, and there was no blood trail. So what on earth happened? Believe me, this is something I've pondered many times. I don't like looking like a fool, especially not in front of folks I have a great deal of respect for. And I also don't like wasting hunting time or budget. And I've identified at least 3 root causes. I'll share them now and then we can discuss what I could have done differently. Number 1, I didn't appreciate the effect of a heavy recoiling cartridge. 2, I hadn't practiced shooting sitting off sticks. And 3, I suffered from the new client syndrome. As mentioned, the 416 Rigby was more gun than I needed on a plains game safari. But I wanted to familiarize myself with it before using it for hunting dangerous game. Even though I'd successfully hunted buffalo in the past, I'd never really appreciated the challenges of heavy recoil. Because I shot standing, both hands on the gun, square, and lucky to have sticks set up perfectly. When you shoot, your body absorbs the recoil. Depending on the amount of recoil, you might get pushed more or less backward. And your rifle will tend to jump back into your natural point of aim. The natural point of aim is the direction your rifle points when you're as relaxed as possible in a given shooting position. The opposite, your unnatural point of aim, is where you use muscular force to push your sights onto the target. And that was a problem in South Africa. I was in a shooting position with an unnatural point of aim. I had to apply tension to lean forward, get my sights on the Impala. I could probably have gotten away with that shot if I used a rifle with less recoil, like the 6.5-55 I owned at the time. With the bull barrel and light bullets, it was decidedly mild-mannered. The 416 wasn't. Let me stress one thing. I'm not arguing against heavy recoiling cartridges. Sure, some hunters bring more gun than they need, but often for perfectly valid reasons. And at the end of the day, being overgunned is not necessarily a problem. There's only a problem if the shooter is unable to control the recoil. And in most cases, everyone can learn to control recoil. Not through brute force and painful range sessions. That will make things worse. You might even develop a flinch. No, you need to learn it by developing correct technique through gradual increase in recoil and careful, intelligent practice. It's a topic for a separate video. Bottom line is that I brought a rifle in a cartridge that penalized me for substandard techniques. Anyone hunting with a rifle must also be a rifleman, which means mastering the foundational shooting positions, as well as any variations relevant to their particular type of hunting. Why? Because that way you will establish a sound position each time and do it faster. I've created a quick reference guide for standard operating procedures you can download, and it includes the step for establishing a good shooting position. Let's do a quick recap. 1. Select an appropriate shooting position. 2. Ensure the position is solid and you have a firm hold on your rifle. 3. Ensure the position is sufficiently durable and sufficiently stable. 4. Confirm all contact points facilitate good harmonics. And 5. Confirm you have a natural point of aim. Let's be honest, it's easy to understand these directions, but it takes work to implement them. You must practice so they become second nature, and you must know what it feels like when you apply them correctly. If one of them feels off, you must adjust automatically and unconsciously. At the time, it wasn't a poor shot. On the contrary, but I didn't have a checklist to help me implement perfect habits every time. I hadn't practiced sitting in kneeling positions, especially not with a pair of sticks, so I missed the warning signs. Don't get in the same situation. Master the fundamentals. Download my checklist if you need a starting point. In the past, I've talked about the primary red flag of hunting, new. New means unfamiliar, and unfamiliar means more brain power to process what's going on in the field. And there's a limit to how much you can process actively at once. What's the solution? Well, practice so all your techniques become second nature. That way you can focus on what's going on in the field. There's an extra nuance to this red flag, which I refer to as the new client syndrome. If you're hunting with a guide, as a client, you often play catch up the first few days to learn the local routines. Most guides are excellent and experienced hunters dedicated to helping you harvest the trophy or trophies you came for. Here's the challenge. They take things for granted, but let's be clear, they should take basic standards for granted. But if you're in familiar terrain, running the show you always do, it can be challenging to remember that a client often needs a period of familiarization. And the real problem starts when we, clients, don't say stop and admit we need to try something again, or that we need to hear the plan again, or if something isn't working. That's our responsibility. It all starts with familiarization before setting off. If using the PH or guides equipment, you must A. Ensure you have a foundational knowledge of using that tool from home, and B. Get familiar with the guide's specific piece of gear before setting off. As mentioned earlier, I didn't tick box A before setting off, and I also failed to tick box B before we started hunting. And you know the result. I keep bringing a particular quote up in my videos because it's fundamental, no pun intended, and it underpins efficient hunting. Here it is. When it goes down, you want to be able to kick into autopilot as much as possible. That's why perfecting the basics is so important, because your mind is going to be thinking about so many other things that you want your movement mechanics to be as smooth as possible. Bob Keller from Gamut Resolution is a warfighter with an impressive track record. I don't know if he's also a hunter, but what he says applies directly to hunting. So take his words to heart. By the way, on that safari I quickly got up to speed and got comfortable with my 416 Rigby, and it ended up being a great trip in every conceivable way, even though I made fundamental mistakes when we first got going. I'll share more stories to give you food for thought, and if you're dedicated to honing your fundamental skills, well, then I recommend the Red Kettle Quick Reference Guide for Standard Operating Procedures. You can download it at the Red Kettle training site, and it also comes with a free companion course that contains more detail. Here's the link, and thanks for watching.